Thank you for joining us on the Look Up Mindset podcast, where real stories of resilience, transformation, and adventure come to life. I'm your host, author, and storyteller, Heidi Siefkas. Each episode, we dive into the journeys of sheroes, heroes, and badasses who faced life's toughest moments and chose to rise. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's be inspired together. Welcome to the Look Up Mindset podcast. I'm your host, author Heidi Siefkas. In today's episode, entitled From Adversity to Purpose, I invite a special guest, my friend, peer educator, Tom Thibodeau.
Well, thank you so much, Heidi. It's so good to be on this conversation with you again to pick up where we left off, which is trying to inspire people by the strength of the human spirit that does not stay down, but is very resilient. That level of resilience has allowed me to be a teacher at a university for 42 years, where I am the Distinguished Professor of Servant Leadership at Viterbo. We established the only master's degree in servant leadership in the country, in which our attempt is to serve other people first. So that's the work that I've been given to do, and it's so wonderful to be able to share that with you.
Well, thank you for being on today. Most people ask me, how did I find my guests for this first season of the Look Up Mindset? And several of them are from my latest book, Look Up Global Stories of Resilience. And then people ask, okay, well, how did you find people to contribute to this anthology? And it was really organic. It was 6 degrees of separation. And it was a childhood friend. Her name is Annie Corcoran, who introduced Tom and I. I originally had asked Annie if she would like to share her story of resilience and life transformation. And she said, I don't think my story is right for right now, but I know someone's story that has moved me and moved hundreds or thousands of other people's lives. And his name is Tom Thibodeau. And she was actually a participant or a student in one of your servant leadership courses for the county of La Crosse, Wisconsin.
And one of the things I'd like to give a little shout out to Annie as well. We sat and we talked for an hour, and at the end of the hour, it's feel like we know each other for a lifetime. And she talked about our friendships, and she talked about you, Heidi, with great love and admiration. But here is a woman who for the last 20 years has served in the La Crosse County Jail working with women. Good people attract good people, and Annie had led me to you, and we both have a great deal of love and respect for Annie.
This is your invitation, Annie. Sometime in the near future, we'll be sharing the screen with you and the airwaves, because you are an inspiration and good people do good things together. So now this is where the storytelling begins, and we're going to have a conversation about what in Tom's life has led him to be an educator, leader of service. So set the stage for us, Tom.
Today we talk a great deal about mental health and mental illness, depression and anxiety amongst young people. Well, I know what that's like firsthand. When I was 12, growing up in Wisconsin Rapids, a magical, mystical place in central Wisconsin, my mother was pregnant with my youngest sister. I'm the oldest of 6. Her pregnancy was difficult, and so her bed was brought from down to the family room. She had a single bed there in the family room, and from her bed, because she's on continual bed rest for the last 3 months of her pregnancy, she taught me how to cook and clean and iron. And so I'd go and I'd make things in a pan, and I'd bring them in, and she'd look at them and say, well, are the onions translucent? This is what you want to do when you want to make gravy. She couldn't get up and show me, but I'd bring the pan to her. She showed me how to iron, to what I needed to do in terms of washing. I mean, the other children in the family, we needed clean clothes. We needed supper prepared at night. We had to go to school the next day. And so I learned those skills. I can cook, I can clean, I can iron, and sew. My mother gave birth to my youngest sister. One is a deep postpartum depression. She had to be admitted to a psychiatric hospital. So I dropped out of school in the 6th grade. I cooked, I cleaned, I ironed, I sewed. I can remember my brothers and sisters bringing my homework home for me. And so after getting dishes and getting them ready to go to bed, we'd do our homework together and then get ready to go to bed. I'd get up in the morning and I'd make their breakfasts. They'd go off to school and then I would do my homework some more and then do the things that needed to be done to keep the house running. But after a week, my dad knew that a 12-year-old could not take care of a family of himself and his brothers and sisters. So he had asked members of our church to take us in. I remember this is 1961, and there was not really a foster care system. We didn't really have any family members in Wisconsin Rapids. My father had moved there to take a job. And in fact, it took a week before my father told my grandmother that her daughter was in a psychiatric hospital. I mean, I just want to set the stage. We don't talk much about mental health and illness today. Could you imagine what it was like in 1961? We didn't even have a vocabulary for it, you know? Well, anyway, we went to live with different people during that time. We all went to different houses, and my father had who were members of our church because he wanted to gather us on Sunday morning. This was the only time that we had a chance to be together as a family. It's the only time in which I had a chance to meet my baby sister, because after she was born, my mother was not able to take care of her, and so she had to be taken care of by a good friend of our family's. So my father would pick us up, we'd go to church, then we'd go to have breakfast at a little place called the Sugar Bowl. I was sent to live in the house of a boy who was a year older than myself, and I didn't know he had a couple of sisters, and his mom and his dad was there, and he was always in trouble with his dad. I mean, he was a middle schooler. He was kind of brash, and they would clash, and he'd get yelled at. Well, I'm in the same bedroom, so I feel like I'm getting yelled at too. You know, you kind of ingest, if you will, the tension in the household. I had nowhere to escape, nowhere to go, nobody to talk to. So one night, after one of these confrontations, I'm lying in bed, and I'm looking out the windows, and the sky was filled with stars. And I just began to pray, dear God, please take care of my mom and my dad. Dear God, when are we going to get together back as a family? About a week later, I'm with my dad alone. He's getting his car washed. And I said, who's helping mom? He says, well, psychologists and psychiatrists. I said, what do you have to do to become a psychologist and psychiatrist? And he said, well, you have to go to get a bachelor's degree in psychology and master's in counseling if you want to become a counselor. But you have to go to medical school if you want to become a psychiatrist. Age 12, I decided I wanted to be a person of service. I wanted to be a healer. I wanted to be involved in the lives of people like my mother who were suffering at that point. My mother was hospitalized for 13, 14 weeks. She went through electric shock therapy. They removed her thyroid. They were giving her psychotropic drugs that they had no idea as to the impact that they were going to have on her life. She suffered terribly. When I look at these things, when I saw One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I was reminded of, you know, she was in a psychiatric unit and was antiseptic in so many different ways. I can't even imagine now what she might have experienced. Well, when she came up from the hospital, like I said, nobody was talking to us about mental illness, mental health. I went all through high school. My mother was in and out of the psychiatric unit, and I cannot remember one teacher asking me how I was doing. But they didn't know what to say, so they said nothing. Well, how many times is the same thing we know right now? Somebody's going through a difficult time. We stay away because we don't know what to say. They need a presence of compassion, but when you're down, you don't know that. But however, people were talking. And when my mother came home from the hospital, I can remember this very clearly, Monday through Friday, for the next, I would say 6 weeks to 2 months, a different casserole would show up at her house. Somebody would come, they had been talking, and someone put together a food tree, understanding that this young mother with 6 children did not have the ability to feed her own children. I was literally fed by the community. Now it's my turn. This is my foundational work. I'm a person of prayer and contemplation. I'm a person who believes in serving other people is really an act of love. And I believe that we have a responsibility to others in the community. You never know when you need to be fed by others. You'll never know when you have the opportunity to feed other people.
So fast forward to today, because we just learned about your 12-year-old self and how that has transformed you, your entire family. But let's talk a little bit about how you teach this to your students at Viterbo that did not have your childhood?
One of the things that I've always believed is that education is much bigger than the classroom. For 35 years, I taught a class on homelessness. Can you imagine this? We began a course on homelessness over about 40 years ago when nobody was talking about it. I can't tell you about how much grief I got. When you look into the streets of America today, every community is dealing with homelessness. There's not enough affordable housing. And then you add to that the mental illness and levels of poverty. How do we care for one another? So what I did in the course of the class is that students had to spend the night in a lawn chair outside in February. We held a vigil from 6 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning. And I did it on a Thursday night. So they had to go to class on Friday. They couldn't sleep in. Out of all the things that I've taught in 42 years, that is the one experience that people give me the most feedback on. They weren't homeless. They had a place to go the next day. They could take a shower, but they couldn't think. Their mind wasn't clear. They could even feel a sense of depression because of the weight of the cold. Those who had to take tests or go to jobs realized it was nearly impossible the next day because of the levels of exhaustion. And what is important is this. Compassion comes from two Latin words, compatio, which means to suffer with. Empathy wakes us up. Empathy is the early alert system. It tells us that somebody is suffering. So when we talk about compassion fatigue, it's not compassion fatigue, it's empathy fatigue. You become aware of how people are suffering. Not hard to do today, just turn on your television. But compassion over a long period of time is to stand with people, to walk with people, to not abandon them. Carl Rogers would use the term unconditional positive regard. Well, this level in terms of compassion is really what's needed in every level of organizations. Why is it that people leave their organizations? Not because of pay and benefits, but because they believe that their leaders don't care about them. Their leaders haven't taken the time to get to know them. Their leaders have not appreciated them for who they are and what they contribute. How important that is to be a compassionate leader. Well, that's why we teach servant leadership. Service is love made visible. What are your highest needs? What really impresses me and why I'm so inspired, Heidi, by who you are, you seek out other people who have suffered. Your level of suffering has made you so compassionate that you want to raise up others and let them know that they're not alone. Well, isn't that what good leaders do? You let the people in your organization understand you're not alone. We're here together. We are part of a community that is going to grow and to develop each other for a greater good.
Our stories matter. And not all people have the gift or time to pen a book. And so that was one of the goals of the Lookup book, was to share some stories that maybe hadn't been told. The through line, even though everyone was from different countries, they were different ages, different religions, even different languages, there were two commonalities. And you focused on one of those, which is the strength of community and the community feeding your family and how that impacted you. But the other nugget of wisdom that came through, whether people called it a silver lining, whether they called it turning lemons into lemonade, or how I distilled it into look up, they found a way to reframe their situation. Could you tell me how your story or what you inspire in others, how it would connect to look up?
We're not Pollyannish. We know what's taking place in the world, but we have to say there's a way. The way out is through. The way out is through. And as difficult as people might think what the world is today, understand that you can't avoid it. The way out is through. You can try to escape it. You can look for avenues in terms of pleasure, but it ultimately does not give meaning. Everybody that you respect has suffered, and they are not victims. They are stronger and more compassionate human beings because of that.
Everyone is carrying something, and you can't confront it, deal with it, if you don't name it. So.
Very much so. Now, here's what's really amazing. I'm the oldest of six. We're all still alive. And when we get together, oh my goodness gracious, do we have fun? I'm a family that would pray together, would celebrate together, serve each other, and certainly feed each other. See, you begin to recognize that when you find what is it that has helped you to survive, you want to celebrate. And this is what becomes important. Here's what Beth's definition of justice. If you want justice, it's 50% compassion and 50% celebration. See, what's extraordinary, Heidi, about your story after everything that you've been through and the people that you've talked to, they've come out on the other side and there's a deep sense of joy.
Bigger, better, bolder. Yes.
Different sides of the same coin. In fact, you can't have one without another. Another thing that I've learned from Renee Brown, when she asks people the question, can you have vulnerability? Can you have courage without vulnerability? Every audience, she asks it to them, the military. And people are quiet for a moment and then they raise their hand. No, if you're going to have courageous, you must be vulnerable. What creates vulnerability? When other people invite us to share our stories of resilience, pain and suffering and sorrow. Is somebody suffering? Go and be with them. Harold Kushner wrote that wonderful book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. He said, it's not why. It's what do you do when bad things happen to good people? And he says, when you're going through a difficult time, what saves you? Your theology or your friends? He says, it's your friends. He said, do people want explanations as to why they suffer? Not at all. What they desire is a compassionate presence. He said, do you want a tip as to what to say when somebody's suffering? Go and be with them and say, I'm sorry, and then shut up.
That needs to be put on billboards everywhere. I have found that people need a course on how to communicate to people who are going through a very low moment. And most people do the exact opposite and continue saying exactly the wrong thing for a very long time. So
trying to make themselves feel better. When somebody's going through a difficult time, say, I can't imagine. When you say that, you're saying, I don't care. I can't imagine.
You certainly
can. I don't
can.
want to. I'm human. Nothing human is alien to me. So we can imagine. We have a moral imagination that allows us then to connect with other human beings at a very deep level.
I think both of us can say that to be an educator, you don't need to be in a traditional classroom with four walls. And one of the tenets that you inspire in others is that sense of community. And there's something that you didn't mention in your bio that I think is important. And it is a project that you have in a rural small town with maybe a dozen other individuals. Could you tell us a little bit about this community project?
All right. Well, what Heidi is talking about is I'm a part owner of a country tavern. A small town would be an exaggeration. There's one light post and one Christmas decoration that hangs outside of our bar. It was built in 1890, and we have pictures in the bar of horses hitched up to a post outside the bar when it was built. It was run for over 60 years by Leona Cavadini. Leo died, unfortunately, at age 80. At age 86, Leona wanted to retire, and she wanted to sell the place. Those of us who had come to enjoy the place said, this is too good. We need to save it. And so we had a gentleman who had a vision and said, well, let's all buy a share. And we had originally 9 owners, and we each paid our share, but it needed more work. So every time we need another project, we get another owner. It's a nonprofit, but it's a place for people to gather. What my friend Rick Wright has written about, the importance of having third spaces. You have a place where you work, a place where you live, but a third space where you can tell your stories. Heidi, your podcast, the work that you've done with Look Up is creating a third space where people of courage are able to say how they've suffered, how they've thrived, and how they developed the virtue of resilience. Good work, hard work, noble work, dare I say sacred work. And you do it so well.
I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you very much. This is a community, and it's a safe space for people to share their stories of resilience, life and family transformation, and adventure. Where could people learn more about the good things that you're doing, Tom?
I have a website. I wrote a book with my brother-in-law. Servant Leadership Works. I give workshops. I speak to groups. I consider myself to be an ambassador of goodness. Each and every day, I just try to remind other people how good they are.
I love that. Ambassador of goodness. What other title would you want other than that?
Yeah, my mom would be happy.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing your story on this podcast, in the book, and keep on doing good things, because the ripple effect is going to move mountains.
We are partners in the work, my friend.
Absolutely, we are. And I'm looking forward to showing up at Leo and Leona's this summer when we see each other again.
Also, Heidi is going to be one of our major speakers at our Servant Leadership Conference held at the end of June. We'll make sure we publicize that. She has a story to tell and a very powerful way in which to engage others to believe in their goodness and strength.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you all for listening to this episode. If you liked it, listen to the next one, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a boost. Here's to look it up. Well, that's a wrap on today's episode of the Look Up Mindset podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If the story inspired you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a boost. And remember, Look Up is always at your fingertips, whenever and wherever you need it. Until next time, here's to looking up.